Hi everyone, Galen here. Today I have an art journal made from watercolor paper. This is a mini journal that I'm using, and I'm going to go ahead and use stamps with this. These are by Unity Stamp Company. I have Savannah Girl. It's art by Angie Blom. I'm also using a sentiment from the Say It Loud and Clear stamp set, and also Gentle Hours. That's for the mixed media technique I'm going to use later on. This fun little 4x4 art journal is what I found, and it is made with watercolor paper. That's my favorite thing. It's cotton watercolor paper, and I am going to use this for different journaling projects. This one I'm going to be focusing on adding stamps that have been on a separate piece of paper, and I'm going to use the stamped panels sort of like tags for decoration for this page. But first, I'm going to make a background out of watercolor. I'm using dye inks. I'm using Catherine Pooler dye inks, but most any dye inks will work. Also, just regular watercolor if you have watercolor. So I do have different types of watercolors, but I just want to show how you don't really need special kits for that. You can use dye inks that you might have on hand. And I just used variegated shades of pink shade and a teal shade, added water to the paper and the ink, really saturated with water, and dabbed a little of that, letting the colors bleed together and blend together. And then I patted and dabbed it with paper towel to remove any puddles, and then got it ready for some splattering, dry enough with the blotting to get it ready for some splattering. And so I just used some black dye ink, watered down with a fan brush or a splatter brush to just splatter on some of the color. I dabbed off some of the blotchiness of the splatters, and you could still see it. It's just muted. That's just what I was going for, more of a muted splatter look. Now I'm going to, once this is dry and heat set and flattened out, I sort of curve those pages down and heat set the back side of the pages to get them flat. After it's dry, you want to take some mixed media stamps or script stamps or sentiment texty kind of stamps or artsy kind, and just stamp on the edges using your hands instead of a block. And you just stamp the edges in different areas where you want to add mixed media look. This large stamp is a mixed media. It has a clock in it, was surrounded by flowers. I'm just using some of the flowers for the outside part. Then I love this script sentiment there, and also a little journal looking stamp. I added that. And then, so what I'm going to do is make a palette. I'm using an Altenew palette mat. This is, I believe, the small or medium size. And I just dab the ink right onto that palette. And then I just spritz it with water or use the brush to add water to that and pick up color right from that palette. You can use lots of different ways. That's just an easy way to do it. And I go ahead and try to add water to the areas I'm going to color first. And I'm trying to stay one shade at a time. So I added water, and then I'm picking up a craft color ink and blend it in where skin would be. And then I'm going to add some more because it was a little too light, and then I add just more. And then I'm going to go ahead and start with the hat with that light shade. But I realized that I needed a darker shade of brown for the basket and the hat, so I added some more. So as you go, if you feel like you need another color or more ink, just add it back to the palette. It's just that simple. The same is if you are dealing with watercolor pan sets or other liquid watercolors. If you feel like you're running out or if it's too light, just add some more. Now you could take away color, like on this band where the hat is, I colored it all in brown, and now I'm using a damp brush to go over that to remove the color while it's still wet. You can remove color while it's still wet, but once it dries, it's pretty hard to take away the watercolor. So I wanted to add color to that band later on. I'm going to use that as a pink ribbon band on the hat to match the flowers. And then, of course, you can just add colors, whichever colors you like. I decided to make it a pink and turquoise color project, really, with a little bit of blue on the sky. And then, you just go in and going to do the hair now in that darker brown color. Some of these areas I blend out later on that might have an overage or too much on it, and it runs. So you'll see me at the end. I have a paper towel that I blot over some of those areas, and sometimes a dry paper towel picks up any of those extra blots. That's another tip with watercolor. Again, you don't have to be perfect with watercolor. It's meant to move and blend and just not be perfect. It's not going to be perfect like marker coloring or Copic markers. This is just a fun way and a loose way to add color. So I'll just put a teal color down on the mat for the dress. And I have a blue shade nearby. That's going to be for the sky afterwards. And you want to stay with one shade at a time. And if you are getting close to a wet area, just heat set whatever's wet so that it doesn't bleed into the area you're working on. And then move on to the next. But if you're doing it slow and it has time to dry, you should be good to move on to another shade, at least if it's nearby. This is my dirty palette. Looks messy, but it had a lot of work to do. And so I just use baby wipe and I clean the mat, and then I use a paper towel to blot off any of those areas that I thought ran off of the image. Then I heat set it front and back. And this is all just on a die cut banner or flag style die cut. And I used Scallops Banners dies by Unity. And for the flag for the sentiment and for the girl. I also just use my paper trimmer to trim out the word yay. And I thought that would go good with this uplifting page. And I just stamped and cut that out separately. And I used watercolor paper for the girl and the sentiment there just because it was just next to it. If you're going to be stamping on watercolor paper, just stamp on the smooth side. Most watercolor paper or cardstock has a smooth side and a texture side. And I like to stamp on the smooth side. It gives a better impression. So there you go. I went ahead and finished it all and heat set it, and everything is dry. I add a very thin foam tape on the back, and this is my journal. I hope you give it a try. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.